Good morning, Southeast Minnesota. It's May 13th, 2020, and this is episode 24. Allie, a lot of stuff that we can talk about here today. And over the weekend, we definitely had some cold temperatures that caught everybody's attention. Before we get into that, for the most part, we're kind of wrapping up on the planting season, maybe just that last 1-2% out there across the area. I'm guessing as we move west where you cover, it's probably a similar situation.
Yeah, I think we're really well wrapped up on the corn side of things. Maybe a tick below 100% planted on the soybean side of things. Just some folks that maybe have those situations where they need to get some rye off before they're going to go in with some beans or some earlier maturity corn in some of those cases. But really nice to see all of that wrapped up. And then, like you mentioned, as we move through the weekend, some of those cooler temps definitely caught our attention. So we'll talk through that today and just some of our general observations that we've seen.
Yeah, and when things like this happen, I can usually gauge what happens by my phone. And around 5 a.m. on Saturday morning, my phone started blowing up. So I knew something was going on. I knew it was going to get cold and it was likely frost related. So Allie, several of us and our team members at Pioneer were out and about Saturday morning, and it was a very unique morning. For the most part, temperatures across southeast Minnesota dipped below what they were forecasting. Allie, you and I were talking about it leading into this, that these extremely low dew points, that if it didn't get windy, that it could get really cold. And I think this kind of sums up what the morning was like. And this kind of scenario came from Lewiston, Minnesota area. But we had a sales rep out that morning that the pickup was reading 24 degrees. This was around 6 a.m. in the morning. And he went out and did some other measurements, but the surface temperature of the soil was 23 degrees. He had some emerged soybeans, and he tested the temperature of the tissue. That was 19 degrees, and the soil temp at 1 inch was 34, and at 2 inch was 36. And when I saw that, I knew that we were likely going to have to do some scouting, taking a look at it. And I think when we think about corn right away, we have some, fair amount of corn that's poked up around the area. Allie, what are our maybe concerns, or what do you see from a corn standpoint?
So from the corn standpoint, most of the fields that I looked at yesterday, they're just right at that spike stage. So in some of those cases, it definitely did nip that spike pretty good. But as we dig on down into the soil, as we know, that growing point is still plenty underneath that soil surface, so well protected, and still looked really healthy in terms of that underground portion. So I feel pretty confident that those plants are going to continue to push through. We'll see that new green growth coming in most cases. And on the corn side, any plants that I did see that had received frost damage, it wasn't full field scales by any means. It was just plants here or there, which is kind of intriguing when you look at just some of those mini micro environments you see even within just one particular field as you're out making those observations.
Yeah, I'm always amazed when you get 1 out of 10 plants in a sequence, and one of them is just completely melted down from the frost, and the other 9 are perfectly normal. And that's just kind of the way it goes. And I saw similar things. We had some bigger corn down in the valleys of Rushford area, and the low spots, it kind of melted the corn down pretty good. Don't think it, in my opinion, it likely got to the growing point. And it's always a little bit frustrating. It can take 5, 6, 7 days to really see that regrowth come. It's got to fight through some of that tissue out there. But nothing like we saw in 2016 where the corn was bigger, and we, had just acres upon acres and miles that all the corn was up, and we melted it down. And that crop all recovered, probably 99.9% of it. We didn't have to do anything to it. It recovered, and we wound up having a great crop in 2016 as well. I really don't, this thing came up too. Did we inquire some yield loss from that? It's always hard to say. I'm not saying that we can't. We may lose a plant here and there, but in my opinion, I don't think we're really going to incur a big yield loss from any of this frost from a corn standpoint. Soybean wise, we talk a lot about early planted soybeans, Allie, and we did have quite a few growers that had some beans out there kind of right when planting opened up around April 22nd, 3rd. Looked at some of those. A lot of those beans weren't quite up yet. We had some that were up, Allie. My initial observations of some of the earliest planted beans, we did have some stand loss. I might have a very isolated few acres here and there. We got a replant. A lot of them looked pretty good. We're still below the ground, but we also had another freeze Monday night into Tuesday, Allie, that we may have to reevaluate again on Thursday, I think.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. As I was out yesterday looking at these beans, one of the folks I was with, he said, gosh, it kind of feels like we're jinxing ourselves being out here looking at these beans since we weren't quite through that frost window. And so you can blame us if your beans frosted the second time through. But we do want to make sure Thursday, Friday, we're back out there taking a peek at some of those fields. As I get to the west, we have some heavier profile type soils, a lot of conventional tillage. So that heat, even with those beans emerged, a lot of heat radiating off of that surface. So in most cases, from my observations, beans looked really solid. But I know as you get a little farther to the east, you're working with maybe some sandier profiled soils, a lot more lower lying areas. And so it does just remind us that we need to take each field on a field by field basis, because environments can look so very different across the board.
And as you're evaluating the soybean crop too, really look at where the cotyledons are, or that neck. Really look at the plant right below the cotyledons. If that area got nicked, or it really looks like it's compromised or thin or kind of spongy, that's likely a plant that we lost. If it looks good below the cotyledons are okay, we'll probably be all right. But really look at that area right below the cotyledons, and that's going to tell you if you got an issue or not. And we'll be out and about later this week, and we'll probably give a final frost summary here next week episode, Allie. When we come back from break, we'll talk about some of the other hot topics across southeast Minnesota.